then it shows how we then reprioritize the amount in terms of economic classification, but it's the same amount, it's just that it provides more details. So you can then see current payments were not affected, and I don't have to spend time on that, but on the transfers, that's where the reprioritization happened. We had a budget of 6.9 billion, and then for provinces and municipalities, we did not effect any reprioritization. It's remained the same. For departmental agencies and accounts, it's 4.5 billion voted appropriation. We had then to reprioritize 829 million, which then resulted to a reclassification in which Treasury approved, but the overall budget did not change. Then under non-profit institution, we had 778 million budget. That's where then you have EPWP. Then that amount, 771 million, was then reprioritized. Hence, then Treasury approved 771 million. So other line items were not affected. Hence, we have 1.6 billion that was reclassified towards COVID-19. The next slide is just an analysis, which I don't think I must go into details, but I will then deal with this slide, which is budget analysis. As part of adjustment estimate, an amount of 1.6 billion was reprioritized within the departmental baseline, and the reprioritized budget is under the transfers and subsidies and mainly relates to the following programs, which is EPWP non-state sector program. We reprioritized 771 million. Basically, that amount is utilized to support Department of Health, as I indicated earlier on, and gender-based violence, and as well as basic education to support basically the schools. You will recall, members, that the school had to open, so we were then requested to then support Department of Basic Education. And I must also emphasize to say, at a time when health came to us to provide quarantine sites, the figures there that we had were more than what we could afford. We then approached National Treasury. Unfortunately, there was no additional funds that were allocated to the department, except reprioritization that within our baseline. So that's basically what happened. But what we are focusing on as Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, we focus on repatriate, because each province is then dealing with the local quarantine site and isolation. So in line with the regulation, because the regulation, it said the Minister of Public Works is responsible for isolation and quarantine sites to provide and identify. Then MECs at Provincial Public Works, they are also responsible, as well as local sphere of government. So our focus then has been repatriate. Then for PMT, we had to also reprioritize within property management trading entity. An amount of 829 million was reprioritized. That we then used that money for infrastructure projects. Bait Bridge was part of that. Acquisition of PPEs, facilitation of contactless work environment, so that we don't use our fingers when you enter our facilities, deep cleaning of departmental building and costs, and also provide ICT infrastructure for officials that are unable to work, to go to the office. The net movement of the budget basically is zero for each transfer. So there was no really additional money or reduction from national treasury. So our overall budget remain the same. So it is then recommended that the joint committees from the NCOP and National Assembly note the 2020-21 special adjustment budget for the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. Can we take down the presentation? Thank you for the brief outline in terms of where areas of emphasis were made, what constitute the 1.6 billion baseline that was reprioritized, and various categories, including the EPWP non-state sector and the PMT's contribution, which respectively each one of the set areas were outlined that they had separate figures. The EPWP non-state sector to the amount of 771 million, and the property management 829. So, honorable members, that is the presentation from the department. I'm going to hand over to my co-chair to facilitate the questions and answer session. Over to you, co-chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Greetings to honorable members from the Select Committee, honorable members from the Portfolio Committee, Minister, DM, DG, and the team. Both committee secretaries, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As we've done so previously, you will be allowed 3 minutes, and we'll call upon all the members that are in. If I have not called your name, please indicate. I will first appoint to about 5 members to speak. Let's start with Honorable Khai, Honorable Brauteset, Honorable Matebula, Honorable Numalo, Honorable Shabalala. The first 5. Honorable Khai, Honorable Brauteset, Honorable Matebula, Honorable Numalo, Honorable Shabalala.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Greetings to honorable members, greeting to Minister and Deputy Minister, DG, and other officials of the department, and also parliamentary staff. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity, and also I'd like to thank the presentation that talks to the areas where there will be changes in terms of the budget. But what the presentation is not telling us is to what is the effect of these changes in terms of the annual performance plans. For example, the EPWPs, how is that program then in the annual performance plan affected by this reprioritization of 771 million? But also with regard to the PMTE, what effect are those changes and reprioritization? What effect are they having on the annual performance plan? It's fine. We're fine with the budget, as you say. This amount will be reprioritized, but what the presentation is not telling us is to what is the effect therefore on the annual performance plans. That means the programs for example. So, because there were programs that were budgeted for. So, what effect is that reprioritization going to have then on those programs? Thank you very much.
Honorable Proteset, is he in today?
Yes, I'm here.
No questions, Honorable.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair. Chair, I just wanted to run through a couple of items. First of all, I wanted to thank the Minister and the DG for adjusting the prestige policy amounts that are going to be spent. I do appreciate that, that they have listened to our advice on that. However, there are just one or two areas which I'm concerned about, and that is the first is something I've been involved a lot in is quarantine facilities up until this point. And we've noted that the Minister initially said that 17 million rand was going to be spent on or set aside, or 28 million rand in that sort of range was going to be spent on quarantine facilities. And now we see a vastly inflated number up in the hundreds of millions for quarantine facilities. So I don't know if the Minister or the DG can give some clarity as to why that number has jumped so much. And if they can provide both committees with a breakdown of how they get that. Because to jump from a figure in the tens of millions to one in the hundreds of millions is extremely concerning. Then the other question I need to ask is, Minister Mboweni in his adjustment budget speech spoke of 330 billion rand, which was going to be spent on infrastructure handled by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. And a company called Infrastructure South Africa was going to be set up. There's no detail of that at all in this adjustment budget. Does that mean that it's not going to be started in this period? But if it is, surely it should be in the budget, or at least mentioned in the budget. Some details of what does Infrastructure South Africa look like? Who is going to be populating that particular entity if it does become an entity? There are 55 projects that were mentioned by the Minister of Finance that make up the 330 billion. What projects are those? I think we need a lot of clarity on that in terms of this budget and also going forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Honorable Matebula.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. Chair, well, let me start by commending the department for the work well done. In particular, that they were able to act swiftly and in accordance to what the President and the Minister of Finance in fact have indicated that we must be able to do something to deal with the question of COVID-19. So one can see and realize that this adjusted budget is in line with the current situation that we are actually confronted with as a country and as the world as well. Chair, I just want to check the following information from the department. That one, as it is indicated that there are changes, reprioritization, and so on. And it is also indicated that the budget will not actually the amount that was planned, budgeted for this financially affected, it will remain the same. However, there are certain added onto this particular budget. The amount doesn't change that we budgeted for. Now, I just want to check with the department, given this situation that there are certain things that programs that have been added, and yet the money will not, the budget will not change. Now, is there any plan in place? Because in my view is that there are certain programs and projects that may possibly suffer as a result of the reprioritization and addition of some of the programs and projects. Now, I just want to check if then there is any way in which the department has planned that those projects and programs will realize, whether this year, in this financial year, or in the next financial year, or whenever, if one can just get that particular indication as to whether or not those projects and programs that we planned are going to realize, and if they are not going to realize, what mechanism do we have in place to make them realize? Then my last question, Chair, I also want to check in relation to, because there are certain things that have been mentioned. In the interest of time, I will not be able to mention them one by one, Chair. That there's, of course, a possible deviation that might have taken place, which has been brought about by the situation of COVID-19, which was not planned for, and we cannot do things as a department in a normal way of doing things. Now, Chair, we all know that there is public perception out there that in doing that, where there are deviations, you find that people, get to be corrupt and flout these processes in order to benefit their selfish and narrow interests. Has the department maybe thus far, have any indication whatsoever that those deviations might have or have some kind of corruption that might have taken place? And if so, how is the department planning to deal with that? And also, I just want to check, Chair, that will the department put measures in place to avoid what we have been seeing and hearing about, that in doing this, as I have indicated, there are some elements of corruption. Is there anything in place to avoid that in this current period? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Honorable Ngumalo. Is he still in?
I'm in, Chair.
Okay.
I like being in. Honorable members, thank you very much, Chair. I think let me first join my colleagues by welcoming the report from the department and also commend them for work well done, because you know what adjustments to the budget normally do, they bring in an element of corruption. Now, when seeing that there are deviations that are happening, one anticipates that there will be measures that will be put in place in ensuring that we limit corruption in our department. Now, my one question, because I think the colleagues have maybe identified whatever I would have asked as well, but the main question would be that as the department started to discuss, maybe in terms of saying, once we start engaging or start participating, or rather using our the Department of Infrastructure as the economic driver for South Africa, I found a way that will complement South Africa and the country in ensuring that we prioritize South Africans, and ensuring that the department becomes the key driver of the economy moving forward post this knock that we have experienced during this lockdown because of COVID-19, because it is quite obvious that there are some projects that are not going to be implemented at this particular stage because there's a fight against the COVID-19. But after post that, have this department started to engage in terms of saying, post this, how do we then ensure that the driver of the economy, trying to rebuild the economy of the country, public works and infrastructure becomes the main driver of the economy, and ensuring that we continue being the economic driver as a country. I think that is one area I would have, because I'm trying to look forward to what the role of the department will be post COVID-19, because whatever plans that they have put in place currently have been suspended and prioritized, correctly so, and prioritizing in terms of ensuring that we fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Shabalala. Honorable Shabalala.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. I wish to join the members of the Portfolio Committee. Good evening, everybody. And I wish to commend the department. And I realized that with COVID-19, they were able to activate the mode of business as usual. But for me, there's only one question, or maybe the first question is mainly addressing in this adjustment estimate, addressing the issue of job losses, or should I say job creation. I know that with procurement of whatever and the spending that is here, could we be in the near future be informed of the apportionment of the budget, whether the empowerment goes to the women, to the youth, and all those vulnerable groups, but also the issue of reprioritization, whether is the issue of job creation, is it encapsulated in this whole thing? If not, can we look into this one? Because I know post-COVID, or even during now, with this COVID, there are more job losses that are occurring. We stay in our communities, and the suffering is obvious. The issue of the EPWP, I would also want to know how is it affected in this whole thing. Are we still looking at increasing, or where are we? And then the reprioritization and this amount that has been allocated, reallocated to basic education for gender violence. I am not sure whether in the previous meeting you had the allocation in terms of the numbers, how much for gender based violence and so forth. And also, if in our future meeting, can we also have the information about the challenges on these quarantine sites? Because sometimes when you hear stories or issues about what people are raising about quarantine sites, sometimes you are not sure whether this was procured by the Department of Public Works, or is it procured by the province, and sometimes, or is it about the municipality? Sometimes we are not sure. If you can share with us the challenges thereof. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
So, I will then call again upon 6 members. Honorable Landsman, Honorable Matebula, this one from the NSOP, Honorable Boshoff, Honorable Dango, Honorable Graham, Honorable Fanskalvik. Let me repeat: Honorable Landsman, Honorable Matebula, Honorable Boshoff, Honorable Dango, Honorable Graham, Honorable Van Schalkwyk, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. From my side, I'd just like to appreciate the department's effort on coming back to us on time and making sure that they put together a well-adjusted plan for the betterment of our country. I don't have a lot to say because half of the questions have already been asked, but I'm covered. It's just to welcome the report. Thank you, Chair.
Matebula.
Chairperson.
The Honorable Matebula from NSOP.
Chairperson.
Yes.
Honorable Matebula, due to the issue of connectivity, she only can listen to us, but she has questions on the chat.
Okay. Hoping that the UDG and Minister can see those questions. Honorable Boshoff. Honorable Boshoff. If you may allow me to read the questions of Comrade Honorable Matebula. The first one is whether the ICT structure for the staff who are unable to go to the office are done provincial or in the national level. The second one, whether the department has received any complaints regarding quarantine sites in the provinces and how did the department respond to such complaints? Those are the questions from Honorable Matebula. Honorable Boshoff, I think she's also struggling with the network. Honorable Dango.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Chairperson, I don't have much to ask her except that on the quarantine sites, have we budgeted for future maintenance? The MEC in Gauteng has just expressed horror, in fact, that the quarantine sites are filling up in Gauteng, the private hospitals are full, and the public hospitals are full. Is there enough budget to take forward maintenance during this crisis period? And will this crisis period not last for longer than we thought? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Dango. Honorable Graham.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, just following on from the previous speaker's question, what sort of modelling has been done, and is the modelling being amended as we progress in this crisis with respect to the amount of quarantine sites that will be needed, as well as isolation sites? And is there a buffer somewhere for additional budget should that become necessary? Then my next question just relates to this EPWP program for the cleaning of the schools. There's a number of 45,445. Is that in addition to the other EPWP? Is that in addition over and above the 25,000 youth, or is that an additional 20,445 youth? Is that going to be done through the non-state sector program of the IDT? And if that is the case, has the IDT already provided us with a quote on what their management fees are going to be, or will we only get that at the end of the program? Has it already commenced? What sort of effect have we had from it? I mean, has it been effective? Are we finding that in the schools that this has been rolled out in that we are getting less infections? Or is there no measurement being done on that? And then I'm just a bit concerned about the preparation we got for this meeting. Our researcher and our content advisor put together 2 documents on this. And over and above the 1.6 million that everybody's referring to here, there's an additional 1.6 billion. There's an additional 597 million listed under ports of entry, reprioritization reprioritization to fund the quarantine of individuals entering South Africa and detection of COVID-19 infections. So it's a second allocation in connection with the quarantine sites. And this comes directly from the National Treasury's document, which then puts this reallocation, it's a virement according to this out of program 4, and it then puts the allocation of funds at 2.1 billion as opposed to the 1.6 billion. So I just want to get clarity on why there's a difference between what National Treasury are presenting in terms of this budget versus what we're receiving from the department. Thank you very much.
Honorable Van Schalkwyk.
Thank you, Chair. And once more, I would like to welcome the presentation that has been made. And also, majority of my concerns has been raised and questions has been asked by my previous colleagues. So mine would be very short, Chairperson. I would like to know has been attached to the cleaning of schools as well as the NPO programs. So I would like to know, will that seeing that the current situation will most definitely be extended, will those terms also be extended? And do they have sufficient money to sustain their terms? And also, Chairperson, I would like to know in terms of the quarantine sites as well as the private sites that's been acquired. We've received the reports previously of the huge amounts of, specifically in terms of the hotels. Is that sustainable in going forward to fund those quarantine sites, especially the hotels that set at the specific rates that's been negotiated by National Treasury and Tourism Department? Thank you very much, Chair. I'll pause there.
Thank you. Then the last group, Honorable Hicklin, Honorable Tring, Honorable Suisa, Honorable Mashele. Honorable Hicklin, Honorable Tring, Honorable Suisa, Honorable Mashele.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, my question, thank you for the presentation to the people who put the effort in. My question also relates to the quarantine sites. So my question on quarantine is a little different from the others that have been asked already. Obviously, Honourable Broteseth alerted us to the difference in the allocation of monies. What I noticed from the presentation was that there was a clear distinction between the national department and the different provinces dealing with quarantine sites. I want to know where the money allocation was different. Was there money allocated from various provinces? And if that is the case, can somebody please answer me as to why there are no quarantine sites in northern KwaZulu-Natal? I have people stranded in Mozambique who I am helping to repatriate. The problems that we are finding are that the Mozambican authorities are saying there are no quarantine sites for people to come in who are going to KwaZulu-Natal. So they are not releasing people from Mozambique because they have to be accommodated in Mpumalanga, and it doesn't make any sense. It's exactly the same problem that we're having from Eswatini. It seems to be that there are a lot of quarantine sites in and around the greater metropolitan areas, but very little in rural communities. And yet it's very stated that there's a clear distinction between the provincial MECs, local MMCs or local municipalities, and national department responsibilities. And yet there are no quarantine sites. I don't understand this. If we could get some explanation on that, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Tring.
Thank you, Chair. We want to appreciate the presentation. But after assuming the National Infrastructure Bill responsibility, that's Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, surely this should have been seen in the adjusted budget. If not, if we are not seeing additional budget coming through, then this just becomes an unfunded mandate. If it's not an unfunded mandate, then the responsibility for national infrastructure development lies elsewhere. Can the Minister just bring some clarity on that? I know it's kind of similar to Honourable Brautus's question. My second question is what effect will the suspension and reprioritization of the 1.6 billion towards COVID-19 response have on the department achieving its key outcomes? Then how much of, if any, of the 771 million reprioritized for recruiting the 45,445 participants for 10 months to help clean and sanitize schools has actually gone towards creating sustainable jobs? While many would appreciate that they would be employed for, I think the period there was for 10 months, but certainly I think with that amount of money, we should be looking at creating sustainable jobs. And so taking those particular participants and actually upskilling them. And then I think my other questions would be just, could we have an update of the number of facilities that are available and that have been assessed as being ready? So there's a number that 1,400 facilities, but of those 1,400, just about 300 or 400 have been deemed to be actually ready. So could we have an update on the number of facilities, how many are actually ready, the number of beds, whether it's 1,000, 2,000 beds, but how many of the beds are actually ready, and even a list of schools. I know that there were some of the governing bodies that were hesitant to calling their teachers back to schools because apparently the teachers were asked to sanitize the schools. Those that have actually gone to sanitize, can we have a list? Is it possible for us to have a list of all of the schools that have been deep cleaned or sanitized? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Tring. Honourable Suisa.
Thank you, Chair. I think let's start with the schools. What I want to understand is the schools that are going to be sanitized. Is it the schools that are already under the Department of Public Works? Because I remember there's a list of schools where we were told that the Department of Public Works is assisting them. Is it those schools or is it all the schools that fall under DPE? And another thing that I need to understand is there was already a program running from the DPE pertaining the sanitizing of schools and the cleansing of schools. Is the program continuing or are we focusing on other schools? And can we also be provided with a list of schools that are going to be sanitized? And then coming to the EPWP, are we considering before the lockdown, there were already beneficiaries of EPWP that were already in the system? Have those people been considered, or is the department recruiting new people to go and do this the sanitizing of schools and everything? And then the quarantine sites, the sanitizing of those buildings, is it especially with the private sites, your lodges and your hospitals, is it the responsibility of the department, or is it the responsibility of the owner of the building that they need to make sure that their quarantine sites are clean, they are sanitized, everything is there? And actually, when it comes to what is the role of the Department of Public Works when it comes to sanitizing private buildings and all of those things? And another thing, we are still waiting for the list of quarantine sites. We haven't received any list of quarantine sites because I'm afraid that we are going to speak about quarantine sites and money allocated for quarantine sites. The next thing we are going to sit with a report of fruitless expenditure and irregular expenditure, whereby some of these buildings do not even exist. So we are still waiting for that, so that we must see these buildings. We must see whether they are actually are they conducive enough to accommodate people. For an example that I can make, I received a report that they are using in Northwest, they are using Vuselela College, which is actually a place, I don't know if it's the responsibility of national or provincial. They are using one of the colleges, Vuselela College, as a quarantine site. They are using Tusk as a quarantine site. And I ask myself if those, especially the Vuselela, because we know that students were staying there, and we know that sometimes our students, they do whatever that they come by, because of sometimes they can't even afford to clean their places. Have those places actually been cleansed enough to accommodate? And it's very serious that you'd find that people want to come back home, but they don't know where they are going to be quarantined. We have been having a lot of issues of people being stuck somewhere. We had an issue of Eastern Cape students, learners, that were stuck for hours in a bus because there was no clear clarity as to where they were supposed to go. So can we get the list of those quarantine sites so that we can also go and see if they are conducive or not? And we can also say, okay, we know of this place, we know of this place, we know of this place. We don't want to find ourselves next year to be sitting, when we are sitting with a COVID-19 budget, and then we only find out that certain buildings were paid for, but those buildings are not actually in existence. And also coming to the PPEs, is the department going to consider buying PPEs from small businesses that are actually, because we have companies here that produce sanitizers, that produce masks, that produce everything within South Africa? Is the department going to consider getting those companies on board to buy those products? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's also welcome Honorable Kopane and Honorable Jobo, who have just joined us. Honorable Mashele.
Thanks, Chair. Let me join the chorus in appreciating the presentation. Chair, 3 issues I want to raise. One, what will be the impact on these programs where money was shifted? What impact does this shifting of this money bring? Clearly, Chair, there was underspending in the first quarter in these programs. What is it that what is it that the department will fail to achieve or deliver because of this underspending? What role do you think you'll play as a department now or post or beyond COVID, if there is anything like that, in terms of job creation? Lastly, on the issue of EPWP, one believes that, or one has this thinking that EPWP is one of the programs that assist in job creation. If indeed we are going to have COVID for a very long time and unemployment is rising in the country, and yourself as a department, you saw it necessary to go and reduce that budget, how do you want to get into the space in terms of assisting in job creation? Because one will think that you'll be deciding in pumping more money in EPWP such that our people can be assisted in getting those necessary jobs that they need. Coupled to that is the question which was asked by the previous speaker to say, when COVID happened, surely you had started with the processes of identifying, or in certain instances, I want to believe that you had already recruited people in EPWP. What is happening to those particular people? Thank you very much, Chair. I submit, Chair.
Okay, thank you, honorable members. Just a few questions from me before I hand over to Minister. Let me also add my voice in appreciating the presentation. Many of the questions that I wanted to ask have been covered by the honorable members. The issue of the numbers in EPWP, 45,000, and this 25,000 that has been recruited between 20 April and 7 May. If you can just assist, what is the actual number that has been recruited? Are we talking about the 45,000, or are we referring to the 20,445? If you can assist on that one, please. And also, there is a recruitment that is being done by Department of Health. Also, are we referring to that, or have we transferred the money as the grant to Department of Health to assist, like this issue of sanitizing schools? Is it Public Works, or is this done by Department of Health or by Department of Education? Another question which has not been asked, what is the role of the Department of Home Affairs and Health on those land ports of entry, especially in the quarantine of those individuals entering South Africa, and detection of the infections, COVID-19 infections? Those are the only questions. Others are covered by the honorable members. Over to you,
Can I just also add my voice, Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair.
before you hand over to the minister to respond.
Sorry,
Just
Chair.
3 issues from my side.
Yeah.
The first one relates to the procurement of COVID-19 goods and services, in line with the Treasury's practice note that there has to be accountability in terms of goods and services procured through emergency procedures. We just want to get a sense in terms of the capacity of the department in terms of the internal audit unit to be able to audit such expenditure that took place outside the normal practice. But more than that, I think this point is buttressed by the fact that there has been a number of issues raised around the port of entry fence that was built. So it is important that we just get an assurance from the department in terms of the procurement of goods and services that is taking place during COVID-19. The second one relates to the infrastructure component that has been added to the department. How will COVID-19 pandemic affect it? Precisely by virtue of the fact that you are in a process of reconfiguration, it is important just to get a sense as to whether these changes will not hamper the ability of the department to be able to implement the infrastructure program. The third one relates to the partnership between the Department of Basic Education and Public Works, particularly around the cleaning of school. Well, number one. Two, how is the department assisting the Department of Education to deal with the 1,600 schools that were vandalized? Thirdly, the refocus of the EPWP grants towards cleaning, but more than that, also the role that the department and its entities like the IDT is playing in terms of the hygiene strategy. More so the role that is played by the NPOs as marshaled by the IDT. It will be important just to get a sense in terms of the interaction that the Department of Public Works is having with the Department of Basic Education, particularly around the infrastructure grant of 4.4 billion that has been set aside to be able to deal with this issue. It is important that at least we are taking into confidence in terms of that work that is taking place. Thank you, Chair. You can hand over to the Minister now. Thanks. Minister.
Yes, thank you, Honourable Chair, honourable members. What I will do is that I will respond firstly to the quarantine sites and isolation sites where we are currently now, and then I will also respond to the infrastructure, and then DG and the other colleagues can take up some of the details. First of all, I must apologize, Honourable Chair, that the full list of quarantine sites have not been sent to all members. I was asked a question by the member of the Freedom Front Plus, and I have released the list through that question. But I also wanted the question to be sent, the list to be sent to both portfolio committees, and we will make sure that we do so tomorrow. The second one is that in terms of the disaster regulations, it stipulates that the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, provincial departments of public works, local government, our mandates are the same, that we need to identify sites and make them available for quarantine and isolation. So to respond that in some instances where these sites have been identified by the provinces and activated by them, they were entitled to do so in terms of the regulation. But honourable members, where we are now, and this is the latest report that I have presented to the National Corona Command Council, is that we have identified a total of 5,968 sites as proposed quarantine sites. And we have geolocated them all over the country to make sure that we cover all 44 districts and the 8 metropolitans. Now, these sites represent about 208,000 beds across the country. 5,333 are privately owned and 653 are state-owned. Now, to date, honourable members, 431 sites have been assessed by the Department of Health. Once we identify the sites, then the Department of Health must inspect, and they have approved 409 sites that is suitable for quarantine. And that is representing about 41,315 beds. But of these sites that have been assessed by the Department of Health, only 139 facilities have been activated, meaning that we are currently using just over 12,525 beds for quarantine purposes. So you can note that all the sites that we've identified have not been approved by health. So we have also developed a master list where we include all the sites identified by provinces and by national on a master list. And we can also give members access to the master list. The master list is geolocated by the PICC Technical Task Team, the Department of Health, and we all work together to identify the sites, and we update them regularly, because even up till today, you still receive from especially the private sector who will say, I've got a resort or a hotel that I want to make available for a quarantine site. We take that information and put it on the database. So what is the current status of the use of these quarantine sites? Honourable members, there have been a low uptake on quarantine sites across the country. Various provinces have got different problems, like for instance, in the Western Cape and in the Eastern Cape, lots of our people just refuse to go to quarantine sites. I can remember when I joined the President and the Minister of Health to a visit in the Western Cape, Minister Mkhize asked me to procure at least 12,000 beds for the Western Cape, and that by the end of June, they were going to need about 30,000. We started off the process, honourable members, and we procured just 6 hotels. And then a few days later, we started receiving calls from the hotels that they only have 6 or 7 members in the hotels. And then we engaged with the Provincial Department of Health, and they informed us about the problem where people simply don't want to go to quarantine sites. And there are various reasons. People want to know what's going to happen to my furniture, who's going to look after my house, what am I going to eat, can I have visitors, can I smoke, can I have sex, and all of those kind of questions the people want to know. So there is a problem with the uptake of the sites. And what I presented to the National Command Council, if I can just give you an example, for instance, in the Eastern Cape, we have identified 962 sites. Currently, only 19 of them have been activated. In the Western Cape, we have identified 1,746 sites. About 16 of them have been activated. And the National Command Council came to the conclusion that we need to do a big education drive to explain to people the importance of being quarantined. Now, people that go into quarantine sites are not people that are COVID-19 positive. Some of them are asymptomatic, some of them have got a few signs, and so they are really putting there as a precaution. So that is the latest update as of yesterday that is being presented to the National Corona Command Council. Then the Department of Public Works team has also worked with FEDASA, that is the overall umbrella body of the hospitality industry, the Department of Tourism, to include and to help the Department of Health with inspecting and assessing the different sites. There is also currently a process led by National Treasury where we are in the process of reviewing the current rates that National Treasury has approved. Because we've got all of these facilities available, but government is the only buyer, the only user of those facilities. And therefore, we must be in a better position to say, you know, we cannot afford this. And then link that to the budget, where we have what the CFO has done, because this virus is so unpredictable and things change all the time. The CFO first set aside an amount of that 800 some odd million, 357 million for quarantine sites, of which the intention was to allocate 100 million rand to the Western Cape, and then also the Eastern Cape was following hot on the heels of the Western Cape. So honourable members, for now, we are very cautiously approaching this until there can be a public campaign and until provinces can improve on contact tracing people that have been, diagnosed positively. So currently, the whole program of procurement, we have actually stopped procuring new facilities because of the low uptake. Similarly, we've been asked to assist the province of Gauteng. We have shown Gauteng that what is currently available in the province of Gauteng, and Gauteng has just today overtaken the Western Cape. We have already identified 1,027 sites in Gauteng, and so far Gauteng has activated 21 of those. So it's a moving target that we are dealing with on a daily basis. But there's a great need for education to our people about the importance of quarantine. Then members also asked about complaints about some of the quarantine sites. The Department of Public Works has been taken to court only on one matter, and that is still sub judice. It is still before the court. But generally, when we procure the sites, the Department of Health then takes over the operation of the facilities. And I know that we had some complaints in Durban, whereby we have procured 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star hotels. There is on our books and the different rates that they can charge us in terms of National Treasury. You find in many instances when people come from overseas or wherever they come from, they don't want to stay in the 1-star and the 2-star hotels. And then the honourable members will ask us, why are you not giving business to the guest houses, to the 1-star hotel? But sometimes people don't want to stay there. In case of Durban, because we had procured a 4-star and the 3-star hotel, to resolve that problem finally, the hotel owners agreed to move the people from the 3-star to the 4-star, and that is how the problem was solved. And so there is absolutely no shortage of quarantine sites. We've got more than enough. For
if anybody at our ports of entry claim that they cannot bring people back because of the lack of quarantine sites, that is not true, and I would like honourable members to send that information for me. I do know that some of the port of entries, the small border posts have been closed. So there are only 35 border posts open, and that's mostly the big ones. But I would really like to assist the people from Mozambique and the other one that honourable member has mentioned, because there is definitely not a shortage of quarantine sites. Where there might be a shortage currently with the spike all over the country is with hospital beds. But the hospital beds is the responsibility of the Department of Health, not of the Department of Public Works. So their generally members is just around the quarantine site. I thought that I will just answer them in general. Honourable member is correct that we said that we had budget 28 million. And then I was also asked a question in Parliament. At the time when I answered the question, we had paid about 15 million. I can tell you that out of the 375 million that we've set aside, we have got committed about 188 million. So that target also moves, as we procure more sites. I hope I covered most of the quarantine sites, but the list will be made available tomorrow to all members. If I can briefly touch, Chairperson, with your permission, on the questions, all the questions around infrastructure. Around infrastructure, like members correctly say, that it's a reconfigured Department of Government. It was gazetted in August of 2019, and then we could legally start the process of creating this infrastructure department. But the methodology that we followed, honourable members, was to say, let us engage with all the provinces, with their premiers, their MECs, the district mayors, the metro mayors, and let us just scope and see what is the status of all infrastructure projects in our country. And so we compiled a list, and then we put all of those projects, 176 projects that we sourced from all government departments. We put it to a process to see if they are bankable, implementable, what stage are they at? Are they at tender stage, or are they at construction stage? So we did all of that work. And with the help of the private sector that assists us with a multidisciplinary team, after assessing those 176 projects, we find that 55 of them is bankable and could go into construction. Now, we then took the 55 projects of government, because it is a fact, honourable members, that government alone cannot fund the backlog of infrastructure. So we approached we took those projects that were ready for funding, and then we looked at infrastructure projects that are commercially viable. And we took them to commercial banks, to MDBs, to DFIs, development infrastructure funds. And then there was a second lot where infrastructure projects that requires blended funding, where we put the public sector and private sector funding together. And those projects that needed blended funding, we then send it to the infrastructure fund. Now, the infrastructure fund was created in 2018, but the decision at the time by the president was that that money must be kept at the Development Bank of Southern Africa. And that is why the money is not reflecting in our books,
because then 100 million rand is with DBSA. So we then looked at the blended funding projects. We sent them to DBSA to fund it out of the infrastructure fund. And then the last a lot of projects, which is mostly our social infrastructure, that we looked at, that these projects must solely be funded by the fiscus. And so we then said to National Treasury that National Treasury must allocate funding to the departments, to the state-owned enterprises. We need to look at the infrastructure grants to see how it can be funded. So this then led honourable members finally to the infrastructure plan that we presented to you on the 24th of June. And that is the breakdown. What is going to follow next to answer the question of the one honourable members is that in terms of the Infrastructure Development Act, the next step will be that we need to gazette the 55 SITs, and we need to gazette 16 what we call special social projects. And once we gazette it, then the details of those projects will then appear in the gazette. I plan to have the gazette ready by the end of next week, and then it's public knowledge, and then of course it will also be shared with the honourable members. So the establishment of Infrastructure South Africa, it is a methodology that Cabinet approved, in that we need to establish a structure whereby we have a single entry point of all infrastructure, a database of all infrastructure that's in our country. And so we are now in the process of putting together the infrastructure ISA, put that together. Yesterday we sent it to DBSA, because DBSA must first approve the structure. And once DBSA has approved the structure, then we can start looking at recruiting people to come into the infrastructure authority, or Infrastructure South Africa. Colleagues, it will be amiss of me to not mention the role played by the Deputy Minister, by Dr. Kotsienso Ramagopa, who is currently in the presidency. Between us, we work together to put this infrastructure plan together. And what we will do is that I have to report on a quarterly basis to Cabinet about the progress that we are making with the infrastructure plan implementation, and we can do the same to the portfolio committee. But there is absolutely no post-COVID-19. So that's why we have designed the infrastructure plan of what we can implement immediately and what can be implemented in the medium term and then in the long term. Because COVID-19 is still going to be with us for many, many years. We all don't know for how long. So we don't speak about post-COVID-19, but rather what can be implemented immediately. And also in terms of the social infrastructure, like the rural bridges that we want to build, the rural roads that we want to build, the urban management where we want to clean the cities and towns and all over the country, it will be highly labor intensive. And therefore we have consulted with the Minister of Labour and Employment so that we can look at the databases of the UIF and databases that we get from SARS, all the unemployed people. So it's all work in progress, but ISA will be the administrative arm of rolling out the infrastructure plan. So those are just the broad points that I want to make around infrastructure, but make a commitment to report to the committee. I will now give over to the CFO and the DG to deal with any other detailed issues that fit into our adjustment budget. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I was a bit long, but I thought I was just trying to cover everything, but you will certainly get the breakdown tomorrow. Maybe we can send it tonight. We will send it tonight, Honourable Chairpersons of the NCOP and the Portfolio Committee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, DM. With respect to the question on job creation during COVID, yes, we want to confirm that this one is also embedded in the COVID programs. Already there is a presidential job protection and creation initiative, which is managed through the PMO, Program Management Office in the Presidency. As departments, we have been requested to make contributions to the employment stimulus as to what is it that we're doing with respect to programs that we are undertaking during COVID to create jobs. It's a requirement. We are making those contributions. I think we are also going to ensure that the contributions that we make them available also to honorable members. I just wanted to add on that one. It's also embedded into what the minister was presenting with respect to the infrastructure rollout. The job creation element is also included there. I will ask my colleagues to cover the specifics with respect to issues that have been raised. Perhaps we should start with the CFO and then Mr. Mchisa with respect to the ICT, and then EPWP also specifics and supply chain with respect to how we are procuring the quarantine sites. CFO.
Thank you, DG. Thank you, Minister DM. The first question that most of the members have asked is the impact on the targets of the department. I think the approach that we took, we anticipated underspending in most of the programs because of the lockdown in the first quarter. I'll make an example of compensation of employees. We had a program but in the first quarter and actually the second quarter, we realized that we are not going to spend that money. As an example, we took about 319 million from compensation of employees. So in terms of the impact on the program, there is not much of the impact, because even on goods and services, we took about 92 million. You'll all know that we are not traveling, so there are a lot of anticipated savings that we realize. So that's the approach that we took across the programs. But as we all are aware that we don't know how long we'll be having COVID-19. Indeed, in future, it may really affect the programs of the department if we are expected to provide more quarantine sites and all other COVID-19 related issues. Fortunately, we are engaging National Treasury almost on a weekly basis, because that's what we've agreed with Treasury to say we need to update as there are new needs. We need to continue to communicate with National Treasury. That's what's basically it's happening. So it's difficult at this stage then to comment to say how other programs will be affected moving forward. But for the first quarter, it was because of underspending that we were anticipating. Then there was a question also, which I think the minister has covered in terms of whether we have enough budget for future maintenance. I think the minister has covered that part. To deal with the backlog of maintenance, it's a big program, so we will never have enough money. Hence, there is infrastructure fund that will begin to deal with those issues. Then there was a question about ICT infrastructure. It's not for provincial departments, it's only for National Department of Public Works, including our regional offices that are located in provinces, not that we provide to provincial departments, limited to our regional offices that are located in different provinces. The next question that was asked, I think the minister has covered the issue of the different figures. And the other question was on quarantine side to say, was the money allocated across provinces? The answer is no. The department is responsible for repatriation. So repatriation happens across provinces, but we are responsible for procurement and payments. So that money was not allocated to any of the provinces, except in Western Cape, where we were requested to help Western Cape, but the minister has covered that part also. I'm not going to repeat what the minister has said. Then the other question on finance. I think on finance, we've covered all the issues. There was a question about the capacity of internal audit to look at the procurement and all that. I can say, yes, there is a capacity within the department. And in addition, Auditor General, we are engaging them on a weekly basis. They are working hand in hand with internal audit. There is a program by both internal audit as well as Auditor General to audit all procurement activities for COVID-19. So there is a lot of work that is happening. Actually, when we met AG on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, they will even provide us with a quarterly report on all COVID-19 expenses, because they are going to focus on that. Thank you, DG.
We're not done. Let's conclude. Let's continue, colleagues. Please.
Thank you, Chair, honorable members, Minister, Deputy Minister. I think our approach in respect of remote work away from the office entail the support that we could provide from an ICT point of view, and to that extent, through critical interventions related to the devices that were made available to continue that work. And the second part was the data required to ensure people are able to log in and be able to discharge their provisions. So the system that we have is a national system that cuts across all our regional offices, 11 of them across the country in all the 9 provinces. And all of the officials and employees across the department were able to have access to that particular service. It was essentially a business continuity strategy to ensure that officials can work away from the office, especially from the first initial stage of the lockdown, level 5, when everybody were compelled to work from home. From stage 4, we then introduced rotational plans, which was based on the 1/3 policy. 1/3 of staff at any given time could work from the office, but also to ensure that we decongest the workplace and not have too many numbers within the offices, but also sufficient social distancing, and to prevent any possibilities of those that then come to it get infected. So the ICT strategy then were based on those 2 elements. And I can assure you all our activities that are taking place in respect of even engagement for business purposes are engaged strictly in terms of online video. To a greater extent, the department is using the Zoom online connection for those engagement. But also we've introduced a system where we could send document electronically. Submission are now even signed electronically, even away from the office. Those are some of the mechanisms that we put into place in terms of the ICT support we've given to staff. Thank you, Chair.
EPWP.
Good afternoon. Thank you, DG. Good afternoon, evening, Chairperson, members of Parliament, Minister, Deputy Minister, and colleagues. There's a few issues on EPWP. I will try to go through them as quickly as possible. The first speaks to the EPWP targets. And in terms of the annual target, which is around the full year target. But however, we've had some challenges in terms of Q1 reporting, and this was largely understandable as it was driven, the under-reporting in this quarter was driven by the lockdown. And in terms of Q1, we just have just under 100,000 work opportunities reported. We're expecting this figure to pick up as we move to the second quarter and third quarter. As an example, programs such as CWP, etc., had spent a fairly large chunk of Q1 reprioritizing their activities and their programs towards responding to COVID-19 and, more importantly, towards the economic recovery plan that DG had mentioned. In terms of recruitment, members would understand that the National Department of Public Works, EPWP branch, is largely responsible for the coordination, reporting, and monitoring of EPWP. Recruitment is actually done at the implementing body level. That is the public body that's implementing a project. And we have something in the region of 350 somewhat public bodies implementing EPWP. So participants would have been recruited at the point in which the project was started and at the end of the project. So in terms of responding directly to the participants prior to lockdown and the new activities, if participants were part of a program that is still implemented, those participants will continue to operate. However, if the project or program had come to an end and there's new recruitment that will take place, a new recruitment drive will be undertaken by that particular public body. The other two key questions spoke to the issues undertaken by DPWI through its NPO program for the Department of Health. This program initially began in April, and a large chunk of April and May was taken for the recruitment of participants, the recruitment of NPOs, engagements with the Department of Health. We were ready to implement as of the end of May, but there were delays end of April, but there were delays from the side of Department of Health in that they still needed to engage with their stakeholders. They needed to identify where the demand was, etc. So the Department of Health engaged at a local level, at a provincial level, and they only began implementing this project as of 1 June 2020. So the program is going to be run for 3 months, so it'll end at the end of August 2020. In terms of the current implementation, there's something of about 189 NPOs were recruited to further recruit 25,000 participants nationwide. We have currently majority of the NPOs implementing. There's about 61 or so NPOs that are still to implement. The main reason for the delay is that at a local level, deployment has not yet taken place. And in these areas, the province and the municipalities are working on the deployment. In terms of the DBE initiative, there was an initial request for the Department of Public Works through its NPO program to assist DBE with the cleaning and sanitization of schools. There was an extensive engagement at an administrative level, at the level of Director Generals of a number of departments that includes DBE, DPWI, COCTA, and National Treasury to fund this initiative. Now, after extensive engagements, it was agreed that the implementation of this program is the mandate of the provincial departments of education. So it was agreed as well that in order to assist with funding of this initiative, the Department of Basic Education, together with National Treasury, will reallocate a part of the Department of Basic Education's infrastructure grant to supplement the cost for the 45,000 participants. However, at the initiation of this cleaning air program, and during lockdown, a number of schools were vandalized, and it's around 1,600 schools. So DBE has in the past few weeks been focusing on addressing the vandalized schools. They have further engaged with provincial departments, and through their existing budgets, we're able to implement 3 months. The Department of provincial departments to understand how they can expand the cleaning program up until 31 March 2021. In this regard, the cost factors linked to the COVID-19 for the Department of Basic Education has been excessive. They have spent large volumes of money just procuring PPEs, both for cleaners and at schools. And what they've realized more recently, that's in the last 2 weeks or so, is that when you look at the younger learners, while they've been provided with PPEs, particularly masks, the masks tend to get lost and they need to be replaced. So DBE has now allocated 10% of its budget just to replenish PPEs. So this program has caught everyone off guard from a cost factor on PPEs, as well as the creation of these work opportunities. What was very clear, though, at a DG level, rather, was that there is no additional funding for the program. So funds had to be reprioritized within existing budgets, and hence you had the 4.4 billion being reallocated from the DBE infrastructure grant towards the COVID-19 response. In terms of the reduced budgets and how this will impact on job creation, well, see, part of the problem that we experience is budgets have already been allocated for EPWP projects. COVID-19 kicked in, and what had materialized is the need for PPEs, which is an exorbitant cost. So as EPWP, as part of our mandate, we've begun engaging with practice, looking at how the reprioritization of budgets, looking at different programs that can be implemented. So our targets, we intend to serve as a response towards the increased unemployment. And I think as we move forward, we'll be able to gear ourselves better for this initiative. Thank you. I think I've answered all of the questions.
Mr. Naidu. Yes, Mr. Naidu with us. I think we should cover the area of, but it has been covered by the minister, the procurement of quarantine sites. We just wanted to add specifics, if there's any specific area that we didn't cover on that question. The area of procurement of goods and services for COVID, as to whether they are done within the rules and the laws. I think the CFO covered it in terms of the audit, that our internal audit is in the process of auditing everything that we do during COVID, and then also our engagement with the AG is of the effect that they are assisting us to ensure that everything we do, they've actually redone their plan to ensure that it covers this particular area of auditing all our activities during COVID. It's one area which I think it was not covered. Honorable Chair, we have responded to the question.
Just before DG, I just want to also tell the honorable members that the Office of the Auditor General has asked for a meeting with us on the 17th of July, the DG and myself, where we will be discussing COVID-19 control measures that we've put in place. So we're meeting the AG on the 17th of July. Thank you, DG.
Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Honorable Chair, honorable members. We are handing over to you, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Chair of the Select Committee, there's an indication of the second bite from honorable members. Honorable Siwisa would like to make a follow-up question. Honorable Siwisa.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I've been listening to the responses from your side to everybody on your team, and I'm a bit concerned about something, and this is something I always raise whenever we've got question and answer sessions with your department, that it depends on which platform are we on and what answers are we going to get. We had a presentation on the National Infrastructure Plan some few weeks back, and we also had a presentation on the exit plan of the IDT. And I raised the question to say, if the IDT is going, who is going to take over what the IDT is doing? And we had a presentation on the national infrastructure. Again, it raised some questions. So today we are hearing about the DBSA and what role is going to play in the infrastructure. And now my question is, how is your department going to do oversight over DBSA when DBSA is not a state-owned entity, it's on its own day? Because we know that in the past, some of the tasks or projects that were supposed to be done by the IDT were given either to KUHA or DBSA. And we've never received any complaints that those two have problems in collecting whatever funds they had to get from the client departments. But we always had a problem about the IDT getting their procurement funds from the sister departments. So how is this whole thing logic that we have a department, we've got DBSA, and what oversight role is your department going to have over DBSA? What is our role? What is the organogram when it comes to bringing infrastructure into your department? Because I'm sitting here and I'm listening and I'm like, every time there's always new information. It seems as if every time the information comes in bits by bits by bits. We never get the whole package and say, here is everything, can go and assess, here are all the documents. But it depends on the platform and the question that's been asked. There's never voluntarily answers been given. And another thing, I'm worried about the number of sites, 568 sites identified, and only 409 have been approved. And from the 409, only 139 have been activated. Eastern Cape is going up, Western Cape is going up, and they've got only 19 activated sites. What is the communication between the Department of Public Works and the Department of Health? And then it takes me back I have also another question coming to people volunteering for their places. When I volunteer, I say, I've got a place that can be used for quarantining. Are these people being put in the budget, or are they coming with their own budget? I'm speaking about people who approach the department to say, I have a lodge, I have a B&B that you can utilize. Are those people being paid? And what criteria is actually being used to identify these places as to they are suitable? And again, it takes me back. Let me give you a scenario of task. in Northwestern Town. If you quarantine a person, the person must be alone in a home, but that's not the case in this instance. People are sleeping 2, 3. That's why I'm saying information comes bits by bits, depends on what platform we are in, and then the information. So if I can only be answered in all of those questions, then can all the outstanding information please be forwarded to us so that we must know where are these 596 sites, where are these ones that have been approved, which ones are being activated. Thank you, Chair.
Please also take this Honorable Roteset, Honorable Hicklin, Honorable Graham. They also have follow-up.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my question relates to, I sent a written question to the Minister on the 6th of June. And to just summarize, and perhaps the Minister can comment now or at least undertake to give me an answer. The Minister and the DG will remember the unfortunate situation in Durban when we had a hotel called the Hotel Coastlands Apartments, where a whole lot of repatriates were put there and the conditions were just not up to scratch. And thankfully, through the efforts of various members of Parliament, including myself, and of course the Department of Public Works, which we're grateful for, these repatriates were moved to a hotel of much better quality. I directed a question to the department asking them how much has been spent with the Coastlands Hotel and Resorts Group since the start of the lockdown until now, and then what services were provided in lieu of this expenditure. And then the second question on that was what funds have been budgeted to be spent for services at the Coastlands Hotel and Resorts Group from now onwards until, the question said 31 December 2020, or let's say until the period of lockdown ends, and what services have been budgeted for. So I would just like to ask the Minister if she can't answer that question now, which I would fully understand, or the DG can't answer it now, if they can just undertake to please provide me with a response to that question, which was sent over a month ago. Thank you.
Honorable Hicklin and Honorable Graham.
Thank you so much, Chair. Again, it seems to be quarantine seems to be the hot topic tonight. Minister, my question to you is, with the repatriation of South Africans to South Africa, whether you come overland or whether you come via sea or flight, quarantine is a non-negotiable. According to the Department of Health, it is a non-negotiable. I don't understand, therefore, how you can say there's been a low uptake in the number of beds that have been used in quarantine. It doesn't make sense to me for the simple reason that the minute you come into the country, you have to go into quarantine. When you're talking about isolation, that is something completely different, because an isolation site is for people who have tested COVID positive. When you talk about people who are coming into the country, they are having to go into quarantine sites. So please, can you please explain what you mean when you say there's been a low uptake? I have been covered to a very large extent by Honourable Siwisa, but is it possible for us please to get an organogram of the new Department of Public Works so that we can actually understand where, what skills and what departments and what people fit in to the various options that have been discussed. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. The first thing that concerns me is the Minister referred to the fact that the DBSA need to approve the structure of the ISA. I'm a little concerned that an entity that is going to require oversight then gets to determine who does the oversight and what that structure looks like. So I'm not quite sure what that relationship is. If the Minister could just clarify that. My question with respect to that additional 597 million was not addressed. So I just want to know why there are two allocations by the National Treasury on land ports of entry and quarantine sites. So there's the 4 billion and then the 597 million. And then I'm going to come back to the EPWP question. Mr. Pillay spoke about, first of all, he didn't mention whether or not this non-state sector EPWP program would be financed through the IDT or run through the IDT. He didn't actually stipulate as to which entity would be in charge of the EPWP. Sorry, my cat is deciding she has to be part of the meeting. The other question is, he mentioned something about the deployment of municipalities or deployment by municipalities for these programs. So I don't see where why the municipalities are being involved in the non-state sector EPWP program. And then the other question that I had was, IDT still hasn't implemented some of the non-state sector EPWP projects for this year that ordinarily go through NPOs. There are NPOs that are currently not operational in terms of the ordinary IDT programs. So I'd like to know whether or not that can be followed up on. And then my last thing is, I'm very, very concerned that the Department of Basic Education is channeling funds from infrastructure into this EPWP project, where it doesn't help to go in and get a team to clean and sanitize a school, and then the children arrive at school and they don't have water to wash their hands, and they don't have functional toilets, and they don't have walls or ceilings or floors in their schools. I know it's not under us, but as we're in charge of infrastructure, this is deeply concerning that we would draw money out of an infrastructure fund that's going towards schooling to be used for cleaning and that. And then is that money from the DBE, is that to cover, I just want to get clarity, that money from DBE infrastructure, is that for the PPE and the cleaning materials? And then the 771 million rand is what we are paying the EPWP participants. I just want to know what our portion of the spend is. Thanks very much.
Thank you, honourable members. Before I hand over to you, Honourable Maimang, let me also appreciate the responses that we have been given. But on the side of the portfolio committee, we are expected to report this to the National Assembly, so that this information is made public. But our oversight does not stop there. We have to continue to keep our eye on these funds that you have shifted now and the targets to ensure that everything you have done it according to what you are saying. But I think this is the second time we're requesting this. I've had the information that the minister is going to provide, but I also want to make this on behalf of the portfolio committee, is that can you get the list by the end of this month of the 176 and 155 infrastructure projects, the stages that they are in, and which provinces and regions those projects are being done. And also there is an amount of funds from what we had last time that have been allocated to these projects. We also want to know where are these funds coming from. We have to know. who are these partners that are funding these projects for infrastructure in our country? Which money is with DBSA? And honorable members have said it, Honorable Siwisa, I think Honorable Hicklin also. How is Department of Public Works and Infrastructure going to do oversight over DBSA? We really want to know that thing. Thank you, Honorable Maimang. Over to you. Honorable Maimang.
He's muted.
My humble and sincere apology. My humble and sincere apology. Can we give over to the minister to respond to the follow-up questions, so that at least we are then able to wrap up our work. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members. Let me start with the implementing agencies. Implementing agencies has been in South Africa for many years. And they all founded on, like in the case of DBSA, was established, I think, before 1990. And they have got a board that the administration is accountable to. And what has happened for many years is that government will use the implementing agencies to implement government infrastructure projects. So if members will ask me, because I went to go look for the information, to say to me, Minister, how many infrastructure projects for government, not only for DPWI, but for government is with DBSA, I can share that list with you. How many government projects is with KUGA? And what is the monitoring arrangements there? Now, the monitoring arrangements is there, or lack of monitoring arrangements within the existing contracts with the implementing agencies. That is what I'm working on now. Because based on the advice of the Auditor General, the Auditor General advised that any government department that appoint an implementing agency, you must make sure that the contractual obligations in terms of delivering on time, no overruns, that on a monthly basis, the money is accounted for, that government departments have access to the banking account of the implementing agencies. Those are the new things that the AG has brought in now. So what I've done so far was to write to DBSA and to write to KUGA and ask them to give us a list of all the projects for all government departments related to infrastructure that they are currently busy with. They sent me those lists. And then the next step I did was to say to DBSA, you've got your own founding documents, you are both a lending institution and you are also an implementing institution. But I want to talk to you about all the projects that you must do for government and where they are. But procedurally, honourable members, I had to engage with the chair of the board of directors of DBSA. I sent the list to the chair of the board of DBSA, and we are now working on a structure of how we're going to monitor implementation of all government-related infrastructure within DBSA in terms of the new guidelines by the Auditor General. On the 23rd of June, I signed a memorandum of agreement with the chair of the board of DBSA as to how DPWI is going to monitor the spend of that 100 billion rand that is in DBSA, and also
the DBSA will not decide how they're going to spend that money, but DBSI will be guided by the infrastructure plan of government for this administration, and we will advise them when we need to take some money out of that. That was not there in the past. We are establishing that now with all the implementing agencies. Similarly with KUKA, I wrote to KUKA and I said I want to see all the projects because now we have established ISA. So there's a single entry point for all infrastructure in the whole of the country. So we want to put all of those projects onto the database. And similarly with KUKA, we want to also have that link in terms of monitoring what they've been asked to do. I did the report to the committee when I presented the infrastructure plan of the virtual road shows that we've done around the infrastructure plan. And that include the implementing agencies. But what I have suggested to the implementing agencies, assessing the outstanding infrastructure projects in the fifth administration that is still with the agencies, I've said to them, please, you must first complete these outstanding ones before we start talking about allocating new projects to you. So that is a sad situation with all implementing agencies. I must say there are a lot of technical capacity within these agencies that they've built up over the years. DBSA has got a good social facilitation methodology of how they interact with communities. So I don't think we need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We need to use these agencies as and when necessary. Then just going back to the number of cases going up, yes, we all know, we all wait with a bated breath every day to hear the number of cases. We are now increasing at the rate of 10,000 per day. And the Department of Health, you know, if you look at the regulations clearly define roles and responsibilities for each department. In terms of DPWI, the regulations say that DPWI must identify and make available quarantine sites. When you go to the regulations in terms of the Department of Health, the Department of Health is the department that must then decide whether that site is usable or not. So there is the interaction between the two departments, but the Department of Health has prescribed criteria that must be used to make a site compliant. So that is designed by the Department of Health. The question by the honourable member from the NCOP, yes, you are correct that the question was sent to me on the 12th of June. There is a procedure whereby ministers must take 10 working days in which to answer the question. But when I have to give honourable members information, I need to get it from the administration. And then I need to verify it with the administration. The reason why your question has not been answered fully is because I'm still waiting for information from the administration. I have it in front of me, the amounts that was paid to the service provider that was used as quarantine sites, but I need some outstanding information to answer the member's question fully, and I will, even tonight with the administration being online, ask them to provide me with that information tomorrow so that I can fully answer your question, Honourable Brutesh. That's the one. Now, again, in the issue of low uptake, the issue of low uptake, that is the responsibility of each and every province to do contact tracing, to identify the number of people that need to use the quarantine facilities and take the people to the quarantine facilities. And like I will explain, and maybe members of parliament can help here, is that we need to go on a big communication education campaign to explain to our people why it is important to go into quarantine. Again, that is not the role in terms of the regulations of the Department of Public Works. That is the role of the Department of Health and all the provinces, their MECs, their premiers, to make sure that the facilities are there, but to move the people there, it is not the role and responsibility of DPWI. Yes, it is true that most of our budget so far that we've spent on quarantine, we spent it on repatriation. We spent very little on local quarantine facilities for our local people. It is because you've got this reluctance to go there. And that is something that I think we all need to address. In terms, again, of the organigram of the new department, we need to look at the Public Service Act. The Public Service Act prescribes how you can create any new structure. Nobody can sit there and thumbs up and say, I want this in that structure and I want that in that structure. It doesn't work like that. The Act is clear how you put together any new structure within government. And that is why I said earlier on that we now need to engage with the Department of the DBSA
for modernizing
to give us
our
approval
ICT.
for the structure that we must establish in terms of the prescribed regulations as it is in the Act. Honorable Graham made reference to DBSA to approve ISA. No, DBSA has got nothing to do with ISA. ISA must be established in terms of the Public Service Act. And then I think the issue of the 4 billion rand, the CFO can explain that. And then we have promised the committee that we will come back with a report back and progress report around the state of issues in IDP. The task team is met 2 days ago, and the Deputy Minister, myself, met with the task team last week, Sunday. We met for about 4 hours. So that is all work in progress. And then again, the department can explain about DBE and the PPEs. I agree with the Honourable Chair that the committee must keep an eye on the funds, and that, like I said earlier on, that the list of projects will be gazetted next week. We are currently in the process of making them compliant to be gazetted. Because what does it mean in terms of the Infrastructure Development Act? That if you gazette a project in terms of the Infrastructure Development Act, that project then qualifies for the truncated procurement process and implementing processes in Schedule 2 of the Act. Then also in terms of who are the partners, that is part of the gazette that will come out. And then in terms of DBSA, I had a meeting, 2 meetings already with the board, and together with the board chairperson, we are now designing a monitoring system whereby the department can have oversight over government projects that DBSA is implementing. DBSA is also a lending institution that has got nothing to do with this. But in terms of where DBSA do some work for government, then we must make sure that there's a link for monitoring and oversight. I thank you. CFO, you can deal with the other questions.
Thank you, Minister. The question of 595 million and 4 billion, it's difficult to respond to that because that's the information of National Treasury. But what we did, we made an application to National Treasury. Actually, we requested additional amount from Treasury, and that was not approved. They only approved reprioritization of our own budget. So I don't know how the information then was presented to Treasury, because the amount that we are aware of is 1.6 billion that Treasury approved. Any additional amount, it was not approved by Treasury. So we do have a breakdown, as I've presented, of 1.6 billion. So any amount that is outside 1.6 billion, it's really difficult to respond to. But I can engage Treasury with these comments if the need arises. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO. Honorable members, I think that the minister's team has comprehensively responded to the questions that were posed and the follow-ups. I want to say that indeed, in our interaction with the team, we were clear to say the breathing must be on the shifting of funds within the budget vote that has been effected, and in the presentation, clearly the message is that 1.6 billion was suspended and reprioritized towards the COVID-19 response from transfers and subsidy. And this includes the 829 million from the departmental agencies and accounts, and 771 million from the non-profit institution. And therefore, the message is that there was no net movement, meaning that in essence the net movement is zero. There's no additional amount that was received from the presentations that was made to us, and the programs that were outlined to us was the expanded public works program, and also the money in relation to the property and construction industry, the PMT. In a nutshell, that was the essence of the presentation that was made to us, and the role that other entities of the department will be playing in terms of ensuring that there is a job creation as we address the pandemic. How do we ensure that the 45,000 EWP workers are indeed on the ground as part and parcel of the hygiene strategy? That is the essence of what was presented to us. We are assured that indeed systems are in place to detect any form of deviation that could be tantamount to fraudulent activities. There are institutions in place in the form of the internal audit unit, in partnership also with the AG. There is work in progress in terms of ensuring that there is clean governance. There are other issues that honorable members have raised. I want to believe that the minister and the DM has taken heed of those questions around how do we maneuver around the new baby to the department, the infrastructure Development Unit. It's a fully fledged baby that was transferred from the Department of Economic Development that must be absorbed within the modus operandi of DPWI. So therefore, it's work in progress. There was presentation made to the portfolio committee. We will continue to be briefed along the implementation of the infrastructure program, because it's very critical in terms of transforming the economy, particularly given the challenges that we are facing. Other than that, honorable members, let me take this opportunity to extend indeed an appreciation to the minister, the DM, and the team, and also take this opportunity to express gratitude to the manner in which the honorable members engaged with the presentation that was made to them. Very critical questions that were posed. Indeed, there is a commitment from the minister and the team that we will continue to engage fruitfully to ensure that indeed the department is at the center of the infrastructure development of our country, particularly bridging the challenges of underdevelopment across our rural municipalities, across our rural province, across metros. And on that note, honorable members, the meeting now stands adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kenny.
Warm, keep
Long
safe.
live the chair.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe, please.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Bye. Bye.
Oh, Balisa. Lale kahle.
Nawe futhi.
So.
Bye.